Razer is embracing Linux? Linux on the Razer Blade 18 officially supported Thunderbolt 5 monster laptop with monster built-in GPU, and just some housekeeping stuff up front. Razer sent me this ahead of time. Well, like 2 days before launch, so I really haven't had it long. But I have to send it back. It's a loaner. In fact, it says on the bottom, not for resale, because some people get laptops and sell them, and that's insane. But they have not seen the video, they have no editorial input, and no control. That goes pretty much true for any of my videos, like basically anything that works. But we've grown somewhat, and some of you are somewhat more jaded and skeptical, which I guess is warranted in our modern world. I've also got this external Thunderbolt dock. This is the V2 Thunderbolt 5 dock with an RTX 6000 in it on Linux because it's plug and play and it works. I'm using CachyOS with kernel 7.03 that has all of the latest patches for the various things that have happened. There's like 4 of them. So like it's very nondescript when I say that. And I'm happy to report basically everything works on the Linux side of things. We'll get more into that. But suspend resume. Suspend resume is a little bit of an uphill battle. So there is a companion forum thread that goes with your Razer Blade 18. If you Razer Blade owners club / owner curious, I don't know, follow up in the forum thread to get the particulars of the nuts and bolts of how to get the most out of the Linux experience on this platform. Now, Razer is shipping different configurations with different GPUs and different memory. I got the 32 gig configuration. I've added my own 128 gig kit, and I also upgraded to a Crucial 64 gig kit. I also tried a bunch of other random kits of memory. I also happen to have a nice, basically Micron reference ECC UDIM kit. This is 248 gig SODIMMs 5600, but ECC UDIM. Those don't work in here, so ECC's right out. You can, however, run 128 gig configuration with a 5090 and 24 gigs of VRAM. That is what I'm running here. On this side, it has the 400 watt power input for the 400 watt power brick. It's about a 7-pound laptop. It has a 3840 by 2400 display that is 240 hertz. You can drop that down to 1920 by 1200 at 480 hertz. And this can also be controlled from the BIOS. We'll talk more about the BIOS in just a second, because that'll be important. Things like secure boot. Like Razer does not have a great track record for, I'm going to put Linux on a Razer device, because things like, oh, we don't expose secure boot as an option in BIOS. Whoopsie doodle. Yeah, it's on there. Let's just skip right ahead to BIOS, because the BIOS does actually play a big role in Linux compatibility. So the BIOS has more options unlocked than Razer has ever had. It looks like a standard issue AMI BIOS. They didn't put any points in customizing the BIOS or making it an overly complicated GUI or anything like that, which is great. Linux users will love that. It does expose secure boot as an option. You can disable secure boot. I was also able to enroll custom keys and do kernel signing. That was no big deal. I got a Ventoy bootable USB. And so, of course, that fails secure boot signing, but you can enroll a key. I was able to enroll the custom key for Ventoy. So all of the plumbing there for secure boot seems to work really well. It has discrete Thunderbolt 5 controller in addition to Thunderbolt 4. So this port is Thunderbolt 4. This port is Thunderbolt 5. Thunderbolt 5 is 80 gigabits in both directions, and that works with Bolt CTL on kernel 7 out of the box, which is fantastic. Now, Razer officially supports Ubuntu 24.04, as I've only had this a few days. I didn't really do any hard testing in Ubuntu 24.04 except to test the suspend resume thing, and I could find no combination of BIOS options that would make the suspend resume thing work properly. So if you're going to use this laptop, you're probably going to be frustrated by closing it and opening it. It's a really interesting failure mode. It works, but you just get a cursor. It's an NVIDIA problem, I'm 78% sure. When it does wake from sleep, how long should it take? Got a blinking cursor immediately, and then that is how long it should take. But sometimes it takes this long. The laptop you can remote into SSH, or if you've got it on Tailscale, that sort of stuff, works fine until you try to init or re-init the graphics. So when it wakes up from sleep, if you look in the corner, there's a blinking cursor. And if you try to re-init SDDM or try to go to a graphical console, that is when the machine hard locks, and it is hard locked, and you cannot access it over SSH. I don't know how the kernel crashes in that scenario. I tried setting up a USB serial debug terminal, but being USB plumbing, it didn't work for me. And again, I didn't have a lot of time with this laptop. So, on this side, there's also a physical wired port that is a 2.5 gigabit physical wired interface. I would have liked to have seen a 5 or a 10 gig interface. There's also 2 USB Type A ports, and then the aforementioned Type C port, which is Thunderbolt 4. That's also controllable from BIOS. So like the pre-boot options are not fully exposed for Thunderbolt 4 and 5. If you're rocking an old like Thunderbolt 2 interface where it needs pre-boot DMA, you're going to be SOL. It might work through a Thunderbolt hub. So like if you take it into a Thunderbolt 5 dock that also has downstream Thunderbolt, sometimes you can work around the pre-boot DMA problems with a dock that will fix up the protocol. But that's a different discussion than this review. And that's why the Level 1 Techs forum exists. So we can talk about all this crazy stuff. On this side, we've got HDMI 2.1. Full plumbing for that is coming to Linux soon. Well, the NVIDIA proprietary driver is basically okay. Type A port, and then another Type C, and that's your Thunderbolt 5 port. So you want to connect your Thunderbolt 5 dock through Thunderbolt C. Bar space works great on this. Even like it's a challenging environment having the dual Thunderbolt controllers. The plumbing has all been done for that for Linux. Good job, engineer that actually bothered to check that. 96 gigs of VRAM through the dock, plus the 24 gigs of VRAM, plus 128 gigs in this system is a tough configuration. But Razer is offering 128 gig config. When I first was looking at the Windows review, like on launch day, it seemed to be 3264.96. But maybe I was looking at the wrong website, or I did something wrong, because the pre-release materials definitely had 128 gig configuration, but then it seemed like there was a 96 gig configuration listed in, I don't know what I did. But 3264, 128 gig configurations from Razer, which is nice. Be aware, though, that sometimes the 128 gig configurations have a higher cache latency than 96 and below. I don't know, because I added my own memory. I did my own upgrades because I already had memory. Because if I had to buy memory in this, yeah, I don't know. It has dual M.2, and so the options for that are also exposed in BIOS. It supports Intel VMD. Of course, that won't be relevant for you on Linux, even though Linux plumbing for VMD is quite good. It's MD RAID with a couple extra features. So MD RAID works fine. It ships with a PCIe Gen 4 M.2, not PCIe Gen 5. So you could upgrade it to PCIe Gen 5. I'm sure they did that for battery life reasons. Linux handily beats Windows for battery life. If you're just browsing the web and not doing anything too strenuous, you can get north of 6 hours out of this laptop, which is very impressive for a laptop like this. The BIOS also has an option for limiting the charge of the battery. You see, Razer, again, these workstation class machines, when you use it on battery and you're using the GPU like playing a game, like say Cyberpunk 2077, the battery's going to last about 45 minutes, give or take. It's not bad. But rapidly running the battery down and the heat produced in laptops like this historically has been problematic for Razer. They've addressed this in two ways. One, the BIOS option that I kept getting ahead of myself to try to mention. There's an 80% charge limit you can set in BIOS. That will go a long way to preserving the life of your battery, but more importantly, preventing the battery from swelling up. There's a lot of reports of old Razer laptops where they didn't really properly address this, and the batteries would swell up because people never discharged them. And also the waste heat from the machine would go to the battery, which would cause chemical breakdown. Not great. They added a fan. This is two smaller battery packs. It's not one giant brick to absorb the heat with a fan between them. You can see that on the teardown. And that works great to keep the system cool as far as the battery goes. There's two major fans and a vapor chamber design. The vapor chamber design is designed to dissipate 280 watts according to Razer's specifications. And based on the power draw at the wall, hovering between 200 and 300 watts, depending on what I'm doing, yes, it seems like it's effective at doing that because I can use sensor monitoring in order to do that. We at Level 1 Techs have our own sensor monitoring package. Simon, it's on GitHub. It's fabulous. I'm still working. It's like late alpha, early beta. It works fantastic with the Razer Blade 18, thanks to me having the Razer Blade 18 to test and debug. You'll be able to monitor the power usage, the CPU clock speed, the GPU clock speed, all that sort of stuff. LM Studio works out of the box with the NVIDIA proprietary drivers and all of that. So you can run Quinn 3.6. It'll run at about 17 tokens per second. That is a 27 to 35 billion parameter model. It's going to overrun your 24 gigs of VRAM that you have on a mobile 5090. The mobile 5090 is not the same as a desktop class 5090. It's like the clocks are different, the ROPs are different, the SMUs are different. The mobile 5090 is not a desktop class 5090, but you do have 24 gigs of VRAM, so a lot of options there. It spills over a little bit into system memory, and so there you go. If you have an external GPU of any description, you will probably be able to clear over 100 tokens per second. I was able to do 120 tokens per second effortlessly with our external Thunderbolt 5 dock, which is impressive considering that the link here is really just 80 gigabit. It's not even, 80 gigabit really isn't that fast. It's 40 gigabit both ways, but it's the best we can do in 2026 with Thunderbolt 5. Why is Thunderbolt 5 so slow? I need at least 160 gigabit. At this point, I think 800 gigabit would be much more reasonable. It should be optical. I'm just dreaming. On the latest kernel, the touchpad is also snappy and responsive. The keys have about a 1.5 millimeter travel, so it is very satisfying to work on. The numeric keypad also works well under Linux. The RGB controls in Linux, I don't have the same fidelity of control in Linux as I do Windows, but the RGB stuff works in Windows, and you can disable it in Windows, and that will carry over to the Linux experience. When you do things like press shift or function, the light up labels on the keys change. So when you do shift, it will, change to exclamation point or @ or number sign, which is kind of a cool feature. And that also still works in Linux. The Linux keys for things like brightness control and media skip and all that sort of stuff also work. Mute, unmute, control of the speaker volume, all that works, which is nice to see. Even turning the RGB off via the function key works perfectly in Linux. Woo. I also really like that they made the Copilot key a function, so you can press function and Copilot and get the old context button back. That's nice. Nice little touch. Listen, Razer, if you're going to lean into and embrace the Linux ecosystem, you need a BIOS option that's like Copilot key. Option 1, Microsoft crazy jank because it presses a lot of keys at once. Option 2, just make it the context key. You can do it. Come on, get it together. I want to see that in the BIOS notes, BIOS update notes. You Razer, you can do it. Come on, get on it. The Linux community really would actually like that. For sound, it has a 3.5 millimeter jack combination, so you can use it with a wired headphone. It has a 6 speaker configuration. There's also microphones on the top of the display, I believe. This is a testing the microphone from this darn thing, just to see how the microphone sounds in Linux. You see, Linux doesn't have the same audio processing that Windows does, so this probably sounds a bit rougher. The way that they implemented the camera is interesting. It has a mechanical shutter, but the firmware in the camera seems to be able to detect that mechanical shutter is closed optically, not through some sort of Hall effect sensor or something like that. There is a second camera that does not have a mechanical shutter. That is the infrared shutter. However, if you block the optical camera, it disables the infrared emitter and seems to disable the infrared camera. The infrared camera still shows up as a device, but without the infrared emissions, and even adding my own infrared emissions, the infrared camera stops working. So there's something interesting going on in the firmware of the camera. The last thing that I think I've forgotten is the Kensington lock port on the device works. Serviceability is pretty good. There's 12 screws on the bottom. Battery replaceability, excellent, top notch. So before you have a swollen battery problem, you should be able to replace the battery. The memory, like I said, I've already done terrible things to, and the M.2s are replaceable. There's 2 2280 ports for your M.2, and they have a thermal connection to both the chassis of the laptop and the bottom cover, which is nice. Although the bottom cover thermal pads are really thick, so the thermal transfer efficiency is probably not amazing there. That said, the PCIe Gen 4 SSD is not going to overheat in any stretch of the imagination, and if you do add a PCIe Gen 5 SSD, it's probably fine, although it's probably going to negatively impact your battery life. Most disappointing thing about this laptop is that it has a 2.5 gig wired network port, but you should temper that with the fact that it has a wired network port at all. Like, would you have rather had another USB-C port or something else there? I don't know. Engage below. For a laptop that costs as much as this, it would only have been a few extra bucks to add a 5 or 10 gigabit interface. Fortunately, I was able to add my WIS DPI. The WIS DPI, this is the aluminum one. Jeff Geerling reviewed this. I'm working on my own review. But this is actually a competent USB-C 10 gigabit Ethernet adapter that is designed to plug into a 10 gigabit USB-C port, in my case, Thunderbolt 4, but it works. And they designed the whole case to be an aluminum heat sink. So you could just do 10 gig interface there. And it's also fun because if you're watching this video 5 years in the future and you're repurposing this as a home server, this is a quick, easy way to add lots more extra Ethernet ports. So yeah, good job. That's pretty much it for this one. I'm also really excited for the Core, the Core X V2 from Razer. This is our external Thunderbolt enclosure because it'll hold a 4-slot GPU. You add your own power supply. So, if NVIDIA comes out with a 1,000-watt RTX 6000 successor, I suppose we can find a way to do that with Thunderbolt 5. It's a no-nonsense Thunderbolt 5 enclosure. So yeah, there you go. Important updates and additions will be added to the forum thread, and engage below or comment on the forum if you have handy how-tos or you want to show off your setup or whatever. The prices range from $3,400 to north of $5,000, $6,000. Hopefully you're buying this machine for work, not fun, because it is a lot of money to spend on a portable machine. It's not even is it a laptop or luggable? Unwindowless Level 1 has been a quick look at the Razer Blade 18. I got to pack it up and send it back, so definitely let me know sooner rather than later if there's anything you would like me to try. And I will also post updates if I resolve, if I figure out the arcana required to get suspend resume to work correctly with the NVIDIA drivers consistently. To be sure, it works fine with the LTS Ubuntu that Razer has officially put out, but because of the security updates and the kernel changes and all of that's happening, the support there is a little shaky, and you really do need the kernel and security updates. So look for the details in that forum thread. I will this Level 1 if you have any questions. All that stuff I already said. I'm signing out, and I'll see you in the forums.